Fisseha Habtemaria. I live in Maryland, and I run the company called Global Project Management Services, which is incorporated here in Maryland. And we have an initiative called, a huge initiative called Black Economy Excellence, which we started about 3 months ago. And over the last 3 months, we are building a very robust organization. And the whole idea is, to work on, to create what's known as a Black economic unity, and to use the economic model to at least alleviate or at least to some extent the problems of economic marginalization. So we really want to work on economic inclusion, and we have a number of activities that we are initiating that would ultimately will help us to create the economic unity and achieve the goal, which is like making blacks major economic players globally. So with me today, Avi is a board member, which has been with us from the beginning. I know Avi quite a while. We've been together in a number of initiatives. So I'm very blessed and fortunate to have him work with me. And also, I have with me another board member, Kathare. I think you are familiar with her. That's what I realized. So she's not a new face, but in terms of when it comes to Black economy excellence, she's a board member, and on top of that one, she's also director of one of our departments, which is Corporate Partners for Black Economic Unity. So we have a number of interesting initiatives in there. And one of our departments is called the Department for Strategic Partnerships. So essentially, we believe that one of the principles that we believe in is inclusion. So we really want to include as many as organizations as possible. Anybody who's interested in this project has a part to work on, and also we really want to partner with organizations like yours who have similar agenda and similar goals and targets to synergize our efforts. So I personally look forward to a very exciting discussion and a very fruitful outcome. So with that, thank you again for creating this opportunity to discuss. Maybe Kathare or Avi?
Yeah, Dr. Kathare, you can continue.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting us on this meeting. Yes, my name is Kathare Mundit. I am actually everything started with African Network because I'm one of the members. We start that meeting every Saturday, so that's where I get an opportunity to meet with Mr. Abe, and he share about Dr. Fisseha, what he tries to do, and I'm like, okay, I will join and try to see what's going on. So I get a chance to meet with Dr. Fisseha and the vision that he has, and I jump on it because this is something I wanted to do for a long time. It fit my vision. So yes, I am one of the board members for Black Economy Excellence, also the director for Corporate Partners. So yeah, that's where I stand for now. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yohani or Eugene, one of you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Brother Eugene Talford. I'm President and CEO of Exquisite Import-Export Trading Company. We also do business under the name ETC Logistics USA. I have a secondary company that I own and operate, Talford Guyana Agro Industries. Exquisite Import-Export Trading Company. We operate as a freight management company. We have over 100 customers that we provide logistics services for, pretty much here on the East Coast of the U.S. Talford Guyana Agro is a sustainable agriculture, renewable energy company, and we basically grow oil palm and other oil seeds to produce oil and other products from the actual byproducts. I'm also co-host for the New Africa network and have been with Brother Amani for about a year now. We've been working on bridging the gap between the people on the continent of Africa and people in African people in the diaspora, working to bridge the gap for both politics and economics, and also have been sitting on Brother Abid, listening to him and his advice on putting together a international funding program that would be beneficial for both the diaspora and the continent of Africa. So I look forward to working with everyone.
Okay, Hani or Mr. Opevemi. One of you can continue.
OP, take floor, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Opevemi. I am a network engineer, stroke architect, currently based in North Carolina. Been in the industry for about 15 years now. So currently just helping some international organizations restructure their infrastructure, software-defined networking and security architecture, cloud access, and some other cutting-edge technology. Just relocated to North Carolina about a year, but I do move around a lot. Relocated to the United States in 2013. So I actually hail from Nigeria, but I've been in the States now for over 15 years, just working in the industry and building the network. I'm also a member of the New African Network with Brother Imani and Brother Eugene. And Sister Kathare and the others. We look forward to collaborating with more businesses, expanding our horizon. We're really, truly trying to be a diversified group, have a lot of broad ideas, many of which are still currently in the incubation stages. But our first initiative is actually to gather people together, peoples of African descent. We are a Pan-Africanist group, but we do look forward to expanding our status. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you are the last one, and next one is me. My name is Yohani Paulo Imani, and all of these are my friends. I'm an activist, Pan-African, pushing the idea of uniting Africa. I have good chance to be in many countries in Africa, so I know I'm talking about. The idea of African finances is based actually is not gonna work until when we crack down all the borders we have in Africa, and that's my belief. That's why I think we have to do as all Africans to remove the borders between Kenya and Ethiopia, between Tanzania and Kenya, between Sudan and Uganda, because they slow down trade between countries and countries. So that being said, what I'm doing, I'm working on African unified language or African common language, which is Swahili. I'm trying to push that idea. It's not only me, it's just many people are doing so. To push the idea of one common language as a trade language among Africans, so it can kind of slow down or low down the trading when we use a lot of things from outside of Africa instead to buy from each other as Africans. And I also, me and all those friends who just talked, we established a New Africa Network, which is the way we sit and talk and figure out what to do with Africa and African issues, include African diaspora as well. and it's been amazing to meet all these my friends. So thank you so much for Dr. Yonas Amaseginaro. And yeah, that's all it's about. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everyone for the introduction. My name is Abi. Most of you know me. I was a private individual till recently, 2-3 years ago. Then I started getting engaged with Africans and Ethiopians on issues. I'm engaged in several organizations, especially as a conduit from one to each other, and I've been involved in several non-profit organizations. I'm a private business person, an aviator by profession. I'm part of all these organizations you're talking about, and I work with Dr. Yonas. He is actually more engaged than me in the issue of Ethiopia and the issue of Black Lives Matter and the issue of World Bank. He was a high official in the World Bank for a long period of time, actually the top Black officer of the World Bank in the history of the World Bank, highly educated, very valuable person for all Africans. And he will give us all the background and the things he's doing. And I'm going to leave the floor to him, and we'll hear what he says. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Dr. Yonas, the mic is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. First, let me give you a little bit about myself. It would be short, but I'd like to focus more on this global campaign that we have started, because that's really where we want you guys to join and also be part of this paradigm changing movement. It seems to me and to others, the stars are aligned for Africans, for Black people, to really reclaim our greatness, our rights, our dignity. This is the time now. If we miss this opportunity, it would take a whole lot more time before we really can bring this international governance infrastructure, architecture, if you will, the World Bank, IMF, the G20, from which we are completely and virtually shut out. So that is where this movement is going. That's where we believe that you guys can join and be a part of that movement. But first, a little bit about myself. I have worked with the World Bank for nearly 18 years plus. The World Bank has different vice presidencies, as you may know. There are about 33 vice presidents, but primarily the bigger ones are regional vice presidencies: Africa, Asia, Latin America, so on and so forth. For many years, African Americans are virtually excluded from the World Bank, but virtually all African managers were segregated in the Africa region. And the bank was clear, public in its reports, that the thinking is that Africans, other regions would not accept Africans at the management level. And we could not send Africans to, for example, East Asia or to Latin America as managers and allow them to manage, non-Black regions. And for that reason, Africans have been segregated in the Africa region. I was an exception in some ways. I was in the vice presidency where Blacks were not included, and it's called the Development Economics Vice Presidency. All my career for 18 years was in that vice presidency. I was the longest surviving Black person in that vice presidency. There are about 180 to 200 professionals in that vice presidency. The maximum that during my stay that we had 3 Black people, including myself, maximum. Mostly it was myself, and in some cases there was another person. The last ones, there were 3 of us, myself, another guy called Ibrahim al-Badrawi, who was until just recently the Vice Prime Minister of Sudan and the Minister of Finance. And another person, his name just escaped me, but he was until recently the chief economist and senior vice president at the African Development Bank. The three of us were the only Black people at one point, and all three of us left because of racial discrimination. I was terminated. Ibrahim al-Badrawi was cleared for a vice presidential position, but the bank denied him. Even after he was cleared at 3 different levels as qualified person for that position. And the guy who ended up going to African Development Bank, joined there as a vice president and chief economist, was pushed out to resign. They literally threatened him and resigned. That vice presidency is often called as the ivory tower of the World Bank. That's where the thinking happens. That's where strategic papers are developed and so on. It's also sometimes called the Mecca of development thinking. Well, we World Bank people like to think of ourselves as, we are it kind of mentality. It is a very common thing within the World Bank and IMF. So the World Bank is very generous about this, the ivory tower of the World Bank or the Mecca of development thinking thing. I don't know how many people outside of that agree to that. Actually, recently, the World Bank commissioned a study led by a Nobel Prize economist. They just literally gave him all the money that he needed. Go hire as many professors as you want and evaluate us, how good we are in terms of all this research paper that we have produced. He brought together about 26 professors from top universities in the world. They just literally gave him the money, gave him 4,000 books and research papers that the World Bank has produced. And they said, randomly pick as many of this as you want, hire as many professors and as many research assistants that will help them to come up with evaluation. And he came with the evaluation and he said, you guys are not that much as good as you guys think. And actually, we don't think you have what it takes to be leaders in research. He said, first, you would be better off to hire top-notch researchers outside of the World Bank in universities rather than you yourself doing it, because the quality that's coming out of the World Bank is not that good. It was a very, very hard-hitting evaluation. Interestingly, the only book that this group said this is the best that the World Bank has produced in terms of research was written by a guy called Bill Easterly or William Easterly. And his book concluded that the World Bank has done more damage to Africa than it has good. And the guy was terminated because of that. He is now a professor at NYU, New York University. So the only thing that group said is the best work out of the World Bank, ended up having the author being terminated. Now, to my own story, I was the deputy global manager of what the World Bank on their website say the largest statistical economic comparison program in the world. It compares economies in 190 countries. For 7 years, I was the second person in command. For a year and a half, I was the top person running that. But for that year and a half, they did not want to give me the title global manager because they said Europeans would not accept a black man at that level. For a year and a half, they had a white consultant appearing as though he was the one who was managing it. World Bank staff rule does not allow consultants to manage anything. So he was simply a front person the white face of this largest project in the world. Even though I was running it, everything that I'm telling you has been published in many reports in over 30, 40 newspapers around the world. The most comprehensive report was done by Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. It's a 73-page report. Jesse Jackson has written about 7 articles on my case, one of which was an open letter to the Pope saying that, look, Europeans and Americans are doing this to Black people. Maybe you have a voice that the world can hear you. You have to intervene. Finally, I applied for the global manager position, even though I was told, do not apply, we will not give it to you, and you will put us in a difficult situation with the Europeans because they will not accept you. And I said, no, if the Europeans are not ready to accept me, tell them to leave the program, but I would apply. When I applied, they had to find a way to disqualify me from being qualified for the position. What they did was they got into my HR file and wiped out all my management experience from the HR file. As hard as it is to believe, it is reported everywhere. And the evidence is there. The 73-page report I told you about by Chris Van Hollen, by the senator, shows the before and after of my record. And because of that, they disqualified me. And after I fought, they terminated me. It's a long story, but I'll cut it short. In 2014, one of the U.S. senators, Senator Barbara Mikulski, she was the person in charge of the appropriation committee who she decided who gets money and who doesn't. She threatened the World Bank, if you do not put his record back, I'll cut your funding, billions of dollars. The World Bank sent me a memo saying, we will restore your record in your files, in my HR file. Oh, that's fine, wonderful. But what they have done as part of this retroactive downgrading of my record, what they had done was they have gone on their website and wiped out all the references that I was the deputy global manager and then I was managing it. And I had laid a number of groundbreaking studies where my name and title showed, including a statement that this study was led by Yonas Biru and a group of another 20 economists. So from all that, they have deleted my name and put a white manager's name. So I said, if you have now corrected my record inside the World Bank, and you have sent me the corrected file saying this is your official file as it appears in your record, oh, wonderful. Now you change the record on your website. That's when they came back and they said, your record is too good to be true for a Black person. We will not acknowledge it in public. I know this is too hard for you guys to believe, but this is all in writing, and it has been published in I don't know how many newspapers. The case is currently in Trump's White House on his chief of staff's position. So all that happened. Fast forward to 2019, there was enormous pressure, international as well as national, interestingly from the conservative group. Two of Trump's cabinet members, including his only Black cabinet member, Ben Carson, and another one, Ken Cuccinelli, they wrote saying that this case has to be resolved. The Trump administration has to get involved, so on and so forth. In May 2019 and August 2019, they sent to me a written statement saying, we will correct your record on the website. Some of the things that they have put on their website is unbelievable. but they had to destroy my character. They had to destroy my profession and my integrity to say that, look, this guy is not qualified. How can we give him a global manager position in one of the most important World Bank projects in the world that is covered in 190 countries? There is no other program or project that covers the entire 190 countries, because mostly European countries are not part of the World Bank's program, except in this program that I managed. Because we were comparing economies around the world, we have to also study their economy and say France is higher than Germany, or Germany is higher than France, and they are both higher than Brazil or Russia, that kind of work we did. So, but still, since, even though in May and August 2019, they have agreed to also correct my record on their website, they have not done so. You may wonder, how can this happen in the 21st century in an institution that purportedly works for the, for the World Bank, for African countries? The racial discrimination in the World Bank is systemic. There are 17 World Bank studies that have concluded racial discrimination is systemic. Black people are segregated in the Africa Vice Presidency, they are dehumanized and so on, but they still have not done anything. Until my case started some 10 years ago, and until I started fighting them for 10 years, and now where we are. So now where we are is, as you may have read in this report that we gave you, or later that we sent to the World Bank, my case became a sort of a trigger point for a much bigger campaign to address systemic racial injustice, not only for World Bank staff, but also for Africa. You have seen, the report card, what has the World Bank done to us or to Africa? I did most of the writing that you've seen. You can see it has something to do internal person who knows about the World Bank very well. We now have two issues that we want to address. One is, actually three issues. One is ending racial discrimination in the World Bank. And for that, demand number 4. The other is the World Bank and the IMF must forgive all the loans that African countries are now carrying. And the third is in international governance architecture, such as in the World Bank Board, such as in G20, Africans must have a voice. G20, for example, is an institution that deals with the global economy. How do we stabilize the global economy? How can we promote growth in the world? If that is really indeed the case, how can you virtually exclude 52 African countries? We are grossly underrepresented, whether you look at it by population or even whether you look at it by total GDP, regional GDP. Latin America, South America, as you've seen, population-wide, they are about a third of us. At the GDP level, we're pretty much equal, 6.3 versus 6.5 or something. That is a statistical discrepancy. When you are in any global data, 10% difference really is considered to be within a statistical margin. So Africa and South America have the same GDP, practically, and Africa has three times as population as South America, but in G20 there are 3 South American countries and only 1 African country. What explains that other than race? So that is one. The other issue that may interest you and why your group and others like you join is what we are now doing. We're writing now a second letter, and that second letter is asking for for the World Bank to put us on the agenda for the fall annual meeting. The World Bank and IMF have two meetings, annual meetings. The spring meeting, which happens in March, April, and the fall meeting that happens end of September to mid-October anytime. This year, it's about mid-October, 12 through 18. We're asking them put us on that agenda before they have given a forum for gays and lesbians and LGBTQ, and they have given for women. Think about it. Racial discrimination or advocacy for racial discrimination started far before LGBTQ campaigns. But since they have established, the World Bank has done everything that it can do, not only within the World Bank, but also globally, to protect LGBTQ rights. In Uganda, for example, when the Ugandan government passed the law a while back, the World Bank stopped lending the money until they acknowledge and recognize gay and lesbian rights. So if in 40 years, the LGBTQ movement is getting traction within the World Bank and within the global community, why is this that the Black issue that has been around for generations not getting the attention it deserves? That's why this is the time now global racial equality put us on the agenda. And one of the issues that we're raising on that agenda is why aren't Black businesses getting contracts from World Bank sponsored projects? If you go to Asia, you will see most of the contract going to Asian companies. If you go to Latin America, most of World Bank financed projects go to Latin American companies. You come to Africa, most of them are going to Europeans or North American companies. In a good day, African companies will be subcontractors. Look at NGOs in Africa. They are marginalized. When they're invited for discussion, it is after everything is concluded and the reporters are gone to the print shop that they go to Africa and seek advice. It was just a window dressing, no effecting. So we're asking the World Bank to put us on the agenda to address these things, businesses for African companies, and attention to NGOs and CSOs in Africa. And also addressing this structural imbalance in votes within the World Bank, IMF, and the G20. So this is what we're trying to do. As you may have seen in the letter, 50 have signed. Since then, about 15 have added their names. Some of them are really very major ones, such as the Black Political Scientists Association. This is a more than 50 years organization, very powerful. They have signed on, and many others are signing as we speak. So what we encourage you to do is first to sign. We don't accept individual signatures. We accept institutional signatures. For you to sign and also ask institutions that you work with to put their names. This can be religious organizations, African American religious organizations, civil societies, civil rights organizations. If you work with NAACP at the regional level, at the national level, so on and so forth. So that is, in a nutshell, why we hope that you may be a part of this movement. It's a global movement. We are, I'm sure you guys know Soros. He gives a lot of financial support to this kind of movement. because he wants to see the World Bank totally overhauled. So we're filing a request for funding. That way we want to have a really strong global movement that will shake the banks, that will shake the G20, that will shake the United Nations, as well as the G20, to get Africa its representation in the board, to get Africa its representation on the business table. I don't know how many of you know, when you talk about G20, it's not only the government G20. Underneath the G20, there are the B20. These are businesses, top businesses represented from these 20 countries, so that they can influence the G20 in making businesses for their own benefit. There are C20s. These are civil rights, civil society organizations, NGOs, again from the same G20 countries, influencing the global civil society policies. Even though there is a religious R20, religious organizations, again, representing only these 20 countries. So Africans are not even considered in this religious group, because it is an exclusive group. So it's a major fight, but I think it's a fight that we can win if we can marshal, if we can galvanize enough people. If each of you, for example, can, not only sign, but also bring 2 or 3 other institutions that you work with, that you're familiar with, that is how this movement can gain a critical mass and bring them to their knees, because the time is right with the Black Lives Matter movement now getting global. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't take too much time.
You are welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yohan, you want to say something? And if you guys have any question, Dr. Yonas can give us an answer.
Yeah, I do. I want to ask him a couple of questions. One is I want to request him to come to our panel discussion one of the Saturdays, so he can possibly give us in details all those information he break down. It's rare to have to go through in deep. That's one. Number two, I want to ask him, do we really need to be a member of World Bank anyways, as Africans?
Dr. Yonas, you are muted.
Yeah, for the first question, I'd be happy to, address your group. The second one, do we really need to be members of the World Bank? My answer to that is yes, with a qualified yes. Yes, if we have a say. Yes, if we are part of, if we are on the table deciding what policies should be implemented in Africa. We do have, top-notch economists teaching in every university you can imagine, Ivy League and the top European, top African universities. The problem is with the World Bank, 2. The first one is we're not we do not have voice on the board. So we cannot make a difference. 2, even when it comes to management position, we are not allowed to have influential roles. Let me give you an example. When as part of my struggle, it was a one-man struggle for nearly 10 years. In 2017, I did publish an article showing. Let me backtrack a little bit. In 2015, the 24 members of the Congressional Black Caucus signed a petition supporting my case. 12 more had committed to also sign. At that point, the World Bank somehow got the wind of this action, and the president went and promised them that if they dropped this petition, if they stopped, and not issue this petition, he would appoint 5 African vice presidents and also hire 250 sub-Saharan Africans at the professional level. He promised them that. They withdrew their signature, betrayed me, but that's a smaller part of the issue. What he did was he terminated or bought some white vice presidents to clear room to hire African vice presidents. And he actually made good of his promise, hiring 5 African vice presidents. When he had 5 new vice presidents, I looked at the position he gave them. And I wrote for each one of them, okay, so-and-so is now vice president. But a director in the World Bank's office in Kenya, not even near the headquarters, in Kenya has more power than this new vice president. He has about, in one case, she has about 8 people under her. Just meaningless vice president positions. When that was published, within 3 weeks, maybe 4, they gave good positions to 2 African vice presidents. So they have now started to move a little bit and giving African vice presidents and African directors meaningful positions. Until for many years, I was the only one with meaningful, influential position within the World Bank. And that is what caused all this issue with me. But if we have voice in the board, and if we have voice in the management tables, yes, the World Bank would be a critical player in our development for 2 reasons. One is knowledge sharing. There is a lot that Africa can learn from Asia and Latin American development projects and so on. And B, I always tell people where we are now in Africa, it's more like a 16-wheeler, fully loaded, stuck in a big mess of mud. You can push it and you can pull it. You would not get it out until you have equal force that would really dislodge it from where it is. African economy is now stuck at an equilibrium level that would require significantly more money than we're getting from anywhere, whether in terms of aid or grant and so on. So for Africa to grow, we do need a lot of infusion of capital, and for that kind of thing, institutions such as the World Bank, IMF are very critical if and only if we sit in the driver's seat. We have a say, we have influence. That's why we're not saying abolish the World Bank, abolish the IMF. We're saying overhaul the World Bank, overhaul the IMF, so that Africans will have a voice in the boardroom and will have a say in on the management payrolls. This is my personal opinion, and I have written quite a lot on this topic, but there are others who feel that Africa has not gained. As you have read in this document, in 50 years, the report card itself shows dismal performance, to say the least. But we don't want to throw the baby with bathwater, as they say. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Fisseha.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Yonas, for this very enlightening presentation. We really appreciate it. As far as we are concerned, as far as the Black Economic Excellence is concerned, would be honored and would be delighted to put in our signature among the groups. And also we will be, that's in fact one of the critical things that we are doing in terms of economic inclusion is a core principle that we are working on. So Kathare is here, that's our department that's dealing with economic inclusion, and we have just set up a department called a center called Global Center for Diversity and Inclusion. So that's in our forte, it's our responsibility, and would be more than happy to do it. With regards to the, I have two comments, and the first one is with regards to the question that is it Johanna raised, that with regards to us being continuing being members of World Bank. I don't want to say yes or no on that one. That's for the political decision for the professional economists like you. But we strongly believe that yes, we can be a very strong influencers. In fact, a very strong players globally if we are able to create our own economy. If we are dependent on others to grant us, give us a seat at the table, then definitely we have seen that one is going to take a long time. It's going to be a lot of struggle, but we strongly believe that we can create our own World Bank. We can create our own, pull up our own resources, and when you're united and we come together, then we can influence or also compete with World Bank. So that's the kind of thing that we are working on, and that's what we are in fact, our initiative is focusing on. So that being the comment, the request that I have is, this is a very exciting thing, and as part of our effort trying to really fight systemic racism, particularly within organizations, we have a series of workshops that we are organizing. That's going to be that's broadcast, that's going to be broadcast for public. And we're going to be inviting partner organizations, other companies, and also we'll be broadcasting live and things like that. So those webinars are going to be started in September. So like maybe on the second webinar, it's going to be usually on Wednesdays, starting from 3 to 4. We have webinars slated for 9th, 10th, or second 9th or 16th of September. If you'll be willing to be a speaker, in fact, I was thinking about the topic itself, being that institutional racism at the international financial institutions, and the case, the case of the World Bank. So you can present that one, your case. We can promote it and invite as many corporations, organizations as possible. And if you be a key speaker on that webinar, Kathare is here. We can assign our entire team to work on that webinar, and it's what you are doing, and in the process you can also promote this initiative that you are taking, but also share with the world your experience. I mean, the first time that I have heard about it. So I mean, the more exposure we give, the more reactions that we would create, and then change comes whenever there are reactions. And people are ignorant, not ignorant negatively, but if they are not informed, then it's very difficult to bring about change. So if you'll be willing to make a presentation, Kathare will get in touch with you, and they will be more than happy to organize that webinar.
Yeah, I'll be happy to make presentation.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Yonas. It's mind blowing. You probably will see me like with shaking my head, all kind of stuff, because it's like what is happening? So thank you for sharing your story, because this is very powerful, and the world needs to hear about your story, because if it's that level of racism, so you could imagine what is happening in this like a lower level. So this is something definitely how your story, you have to tell your story. We will be very honored really to put this program together in our webinar. We're definitely going to promote it. You work with us. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. I learned so much and what's going on in the World Bank. Like we read about things, but this is, you've been there for all of this year, you know, in and out of what's happening. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm like, what? This is crazy. But thank you for sharing this story with us. And yeah, it will be honor, you know, working with you and really share your story. This is very powerful. Thank you so much.
Actually, one thing I did not mention, maybe I should have mentioned, was this project that I was leading. As I said, it's the largest program that the World Bank manages. It is so huge that the World Bank by itself could not finance it. It was co-financed by the IMF, World Bank, the European Union, OECD, the UN, and so on, right? So my application to become the global manager, from deputy global manager to global manager, was raised at a teleconference in attendance where the European Union, OECD, IMF, World Bank, and so on. So they discuss, and the Europeans are adamant that I could not be given that position. In that discussion, they will discuss about having a white consultant acting like a global manager. And interestingly, even they admit in that meeting that it is not possible, even informally, even on an informal basis, to designate a short-term consultant as a global manager. They admit this, but they still say, you cannot give this position to Yonas. Let him manage it behind the scene. It's not whether he is capable of running it or not is not the issue. The issue is we cannot have a black man being a face of the largest World Bank project. So they discussed this over teleconference. They have the audacity to memorialize this in a minute. And the minute says, Yonas cannot get a copy of this or see it. So I cannot see it or I cannot get a copy of it. I got a copy of that. Somebody sent me a copy of that. So I have it in my hand, where people at the highest level, maybe not the highest level, second highest level, at vice presidents, director generals from the European Union, from OECD, IMF, World Bank, the UN, discussing how to stop me from getting that position. So this is in writing. So what that shows you is how real this racism is in international organizations, and the reason why it has been sustained for this long is you cannot sue them. They have immunity, and you can only take your case to an internal court. When I went to an internal court, I said, my lawyer said, my lawyer said, we want to interrogate the European Union people, the OECD, IMF, and so on. And the bank's response was, and this is taped and transcribed. I have, the paper, a copy of this. The World Bank lawyer got up and said, no, we cannot call them and have them interrogated. They are very nervous. They are very worried about this. So the internal court said, no, you cannot cross-examine them. This is the kind of blunt racism. And the issue is, if they can do to one of their colleagues, because I was their colleague, or one of their colleagues, if they can do that, if this is the mentality in the World Bank at the management level, how do they treat, poor Africans, poor Caribbeans, and poor Brazilian Black people. This is, and the funny thing is, there are internal World Bank reports. I have a copy of them. These are very, very highly guarded, confidential materials. One of them said, Black people cannot be managers because they are unsophisticated and inferior. I'm quoting. This is the World Bank report. I see your faces and reactions. Another one says, the World Bank, the Black people in the World Bank can only work in the Africa region because they can compete better there. In other words, we cannot go into Asia and compete with Asians or, and yet another one says, African people, no, Black people are not good with numbers. Therefore, they cannot expect to be in the front offices of working on finance and so on and so forth. I mean, these are reports. These are not like, corridor talks. This is the kind of racism that we have. But I think now we have, the timing is right. The Black Lives Matter movement is right. And if we can get enough people from this group, if you can galvanize, if each one of you at least bring one or two groups, because as I said, the petition is signed by, not by individuals, but by groups, by organizations, we can really have a major global effort. One of these, the organizations that signed is Addis Ababa University, which is the oldest university in sub-Saharan Africa. We're trying to get historically Black colleges and universities here to sign. You would be surprised, particularly the World Bank is vicious when it comes to African Americans. And there is a reason. The reason is, one of the HR vice presidents say, can you imagine us having 200 or 400 African Americans? They will burn this place down. Because, African Americans with their civil rights story and so on would not take what Africans are taking. And there is another reason why Africans take that kind of abuse. Most of them are on a G4 visa, World Bank issued G4 visa. If for whatever reason they terminate you, you have to leave the country in 2 months. Imagine you have, your kids are born and raised in the US, they do not speak their, local mother tongue. For all practical reasons, they are Americans, both by birth and also by frame of mind. So the parents will have to sacrifice and take all kind of abuse to be able to give their children the kind of life that they are used to. The World Bank knows this. So in 2009, the World Bank has about 10,000 employees. Most people do not know that. If you go to, World Bank buildings, there are about 8 or 10. Some of them are, take the entire block. Out of most of the staff, of course, are foreigners. In 2009, there were about 1,300 or 1,030 American citizens at the professional level. 1,030 or 1,300, I have to check. How many African Americans do you think there were out of the 1,300 or 1,030? There were 4. Only 4, because they are afraid if they are 400, the World Bank cannot continue its business as usual. They will burn that place down, and they would burn that place down. So this is really the World Bank that most people do not know. And from the day I joined the World Bank, I was known to fighting, and every year when it came to evaluation, It was full out war. I would not accept anything that had any connotation about race and so on. And the fact that I was in white's only vice presidency, and for 3 years I was the second most highly rated performer in that unit, it was very difficult for them to take action against me. But even with all that performance record and so on, I was not spared. They literally retroactively downgraded my record, saying his record is too good to be true for a black man. As Jesse Jackson put it in one of his articles, he had about 7. He said the World Bank retroactively degraded my record, believing that his performance is beyond the natural capability of a black man, is exactly how he put it. So in any case, I think we have talked enough. If you have more questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, Eugene, he raised the hand. Eugene, microphone is to you.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Yonas, for allowing us to listen in on some of your conversation. And yeah, I did my intern at the World Bank when I first graduated, and I know what you're talking about, because in some cases, I was the only black person from miles around in that institution, and right there in Washington, D.C. with the World Bank and the IMF headquarters being there. So I definitely understand what you may have experienced. One thing, it sounds like this is sort of a personal experience that you've gone through. And of course, my question is, I know the Inter-American Development Bank and the African Development Bank are actually sister banks that are partnered up with the World Bank. And so what are you saying is that most of the time when they have the UN and the G8 conferences, there is a lack of, I guess, attendance for the African nations who are actually, I think they buy into partnership with these institutions, or if they've already signed on, it's the actual an agreement that they put in place. So what is it specifically, besides relaying the information about what's going on in that institution? I was just thinking, what would be the primary reason and approach to looking at having that reform take place? And I say this because I do know that the major donors are the colonizers, and those institutions that fund those nations that fund the World Bank, or perhaps donate a certain amount of money to the World Bank to go towards certain projects. I know that there's probably been a discrimination, but a lot of times, if you're bidding on certain contracts, government contracts in foreign nations, you have to have a foreign partner. So are you saying that with many of the contracts that are being divvied out, there is a lack of, say, the African partner in which they're supposed to partner up with? Is that what you're saying? And then that's why we're trying to get petitions signed to have that reviewed by someone of, I guess, an organization of higher stature. Is that what you're trying to get towards?
No, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. Actually, what has happened recently, there is a change in paradigm. Until recently, the Western countries believed that whatever help that they provide to the world, to Africa, was more like a philanthropic support. That now has changed. Europe and America now understand development in Africa is their own strategic interest for 2 reasons. One is, of course, as you may have seen, migration, particularly in Europe. A flood of migration is coming, you cannot stop it once it is on your border. It doesn't matter how strong your immigration policy may be until you manage to find a resolution or a solution for the reason why most Africans are running away from their countries. This will continue. That is one issue. Self-interest, their own survival. And also, over the last 10 years, there has been a racist movement from conservative politicians in Africa, in Europe, as well as in the US. They don't want more Black people to come, and that is really what propelled President Trump to be where he is. But this is done over and over. It has happened in Canada, right now in Brazil, the same kind of mentality, and throughout Europe. What they're now saying is, whatever it takes, we have to make sure Africa has to be developed. The second thing that they're afraid of is, if the way Africa is growing in terms of population, with its economic development lagging far behind, there could be a lot of instability, political instability, and that can serve as a recruitment ground for terrorist organizations. That is really what is worrying. So Africa's development has become an important part of their strategic international policy, out of self-interest. Now the issue is, why is Africa not given full ownership of its development policy? Why is, if you go to Asia, they have a simple policy with the World Bank. We want your money, but not your advice. We want your money support in loan and in grant, but we are the owners, the authors, the owners of our development policy. This is how Asia grew. This is how Latin America grew. When it comes to Africa, most of our strategic plans at the national level are really drawn at the World Bank and at the IMF, at the UNDP. What we're saying is that has to stop. With the globalization going on, we really cannot take our Africa out of that global movement, global economy. We really need to benefit from it. But in order to do that, there must be a structural change. And that structural change must start from, we have to have a voice. Why is this that, 80%, 70% of the contract, World Bank contract, is given for Asian corporations and companies in Asia, the same in Latin America. But when you come to Africa, a big bulk of the business contract is given to outside firms. Their explanation is always they do not have capacity.
Well, it sounds like it may be a lack of resources available as far as when there come, well, from what I know, just from local as well as federal government bidding process, it may be lack of information about the contract or the project that is coming up, and it's not trickling down to the local sectors to where they could benefit from that, other than coming in as a subcontractor. But we all know that a lot of times too, this is systematic racism that has taken place for many centuries, and that is because most of the neo-colonial colonizers, they still want a footprint in and on the African continent. They are saying that Africans are not capable of managing and running their own resources, or may lack the education or the skills or the capability to utilize those resources to be effective for each nation. But we all know a lot of that stems from the Berlin Conference, when Africa got divided up without the presence of any Africans being there, and of course had already mapped out where all the natural resources to be able to bankroll their economies in the Western region. And therefore today Africans still get left out of what's taking place. But with that information that you have given us, and I actually looked at this manifest write-up that you gave us, and so you're saying that corporations cannot participate in this, or is it only nonprofit organizations, or it could be any organization that have a concern about this sign on to be a part of this petition? Is that what you're saying as well?
Anybody can sign as long as, you know, individual, not individual, like, you know, I cannot sign as a Yonas Biru, but any organization of any color, people of, you know, conscience, and anybody who stands for justice can sign it as an organization, be it NGO, CSO, or corporations, or, you know, companies, because basically a lot is changing. That's why when I started, I said the stars are aligned for us to make a significant change for a number of reasons. One is the fact that China is coming into Africa with billions of dollars is worrying Europeans and the Americans. Two, and a very, very important change, actually triggered by Trump, what they are now saying is, no, we're not going to give government to our money to governments. We're going to use that money as a leverage to American or European corporations to invest in Africa. The reason for this is, you see, if China wants to give Africa $200 billion, they can do it in a week, because the decision-making process is people at the high up, they can decide. If Trump wants us to give Africa $200 billion, he cannot do it, or Obama, or anybody. It has to go through appropriation process, and it's impossible to even imagine $200 billion going to Africa. But what they are now doing is, if the most we can do is 50 billion, and if we can get that through the appropriation process, if we use that as a leverage so that corporations can move and invest in Africa, because Asian countries grew because they were able to attract European, American, and so on firms to come in. As long as you do the contract with these people, the rule of the game is clear, rather than driven by corruption. We do need all the money that can come into Africa. That's where our voice needs in the boardrooms, and our voice needs in the management hierarchy of these international organizations. So
what about, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what about the nations themselves? I know they're supposed to have someone as a representative to be a part of that negotiation process, but it's also based on treaties that are made, bilateral treaties that are made so that they can get certain funding coming in, say from the United States or wherever. We know that the footprint is there with China right now, with them pretty much buying up all the real estate on the east coast of Africa. And so this is one of the questions that many African people have had since that discussion started to come into play. But we're in revolutionary play right now with African people worldwide. And with that being from a Pan-African standpoint of view, we feel that it's very important that we be the gatekeeper of Africa as Africans in the diaspora, being able to pull together the necessary resources to make sure that Africa itself doesn't get saturated with foreigners other than African people. And as the new agenda is being pushed forward, the reconstruction as well as the jumpstart of the African Industrial Revolution, the diaspora really wants to be a part of that and being able to help push the ball up the field in that arena. So what do you recommend to the public right now, to the African diaspora? What would you want the African diaspora to engage on besides the petition itself? Because it seemed like it's a lack of information being simulated about many of the World Bank projects that are taking place. Whereas if there are people in the African diaspora who qualify skill-wise that can take on these contracts as well as get the grant or the funding in place, we should be the very first to be approached for those types of jobs and opportunities. So where do you see us moving? What can we do to be more engaged?
Dr. Yonas, before you answer that, let me interrupt you. There are two people joined us, Dr. Rachel and I don't know the person named Migoni. And Dr. Rachel is she's one of the BE board of directors. She is a researcher. She is a writer. Actually, she wrote something recently. It's going to be in book in the next week, similar to Dr. Yonas Biru issue. She took her case to the global level. She's fighting institutional racism when it comes to religion, and her book will be in print. In a week or something. She wrote a big article. I was reading that. It's more similar to the Dr. Yonas issue when it comes to the world level of religion. And that's the reason I connect Dr. Rachel to Dr. Yonas. She has a connection to the Black Lives Matter, and probably she will bring more organization to his cause. And that's the reason I brought her today. I don't know whether Dr. Yonas, you talked to her or not. I was supposed to go to another meeting at 8 o'clock, but I will cancel that one because this is very important. And he already sent a letter. The group already sent a letter to the World Bank. The second letter is going to be coming out short. That's where the part he needs us, he needs our support. So each of us, if we can bring 2-3 organizations to this signatory, it will be very valuable. And I know we have several questions when it comes to our diaspora issue with different institutions, racism and all factors. He will be the good person to give us all kind of advice in that aspect. That's why Mr. Eugene is raising all those important questions. And let's give another like half an hour and let's keep it. And I don't know, his name is Mignon. I don't know. He's maybe one of you, honey, invitee. After you answer Mr. Eugene question, Dr. Yonas, let's give a chance to.
No, there are many issues that will need to be resolved and addressed. One is really the diaspora issue. And the diaspora, the African diaspora is the only diaspora group that is marginalized and systematically marginalized. The Asian diaspora is very powerful, and they're always invited in the World Bank for various reasons. The African diaspora has not been. There are, of course, two reasons. One is the African diaspora has not matured here in terms of organizing itself and creating a critical mass so that it can be heard. But there are so many other issues that need to be addressed. But for that, our first critical issue is we have to have a table. This structural racism in the global governance structure or architecture needs to be addressed. When that is addressed, then all other issues will be addressed in a timely fashion. One is we have to have enough representation. You may have read in the letter. There are 52 African countries in the World Bank. We represent more than 25% of African member countries. and yet we have only 5.5% voting right. That is absolutely nothing. Second, because most African countries are so dependent on World Bank loans, they really even are afraid to use that 5.5% vote, even to kind of publicly raise this issue. So if we raise all these other attendant issues, then we lose what are the critical things that we want at this stage. Let's get that voice in the G20. If Latin America, South America has 3, Africa needs to have 3. Why cannot we, including South Africa? Because South Africa is a different economy than the rest of sub-Saharan African economies. Their GDP per capita is far above the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. So they really do not represent our interests. Their economic issues are not the same as the economic issues of the rest of sub-Saharan African countries. And the solution would also be different. Why cannot we have Nigeria, the largest economy, the largest population? Why cannot we have Nigeria in the G20? Why cannot we have from the east either Ethiopia or Kenya on, depending on either economy size? I believe Kenya is higher, or population, Ethiopia is higher, whatever you use as a measurement to decide who should be. Let's have a fight to have 3 countries, African countries, to be represented in the G20. Let's have a fight that African countries have 25% of votes in the World Bank, according to their be it population, be it the number of country membership, and so on. Once we get our voice heard, then all these issues we follow with, point by point. These are issues that need to be addressed. But if we bring now a diaspora issue and all this other issue, the World Bank is a very clever institution. They have bright economists, political analysts, and so on. They will come in and they say, okay, yeah, we will answer this, this, and that, and they will agree to resolve some of the marginal issues and avoid addressing the big issues. But if we present only 2 major issues on the table, they would not want to be seen they are rejecting votes.
I have a question, sir, if I may. I've also worked in African development in Ethiopia and worked as a consultant for the African Union, during which time I had the opportunity to work closely with the former World Bank director, Isaac Dewan, who's now at Harvard. And also when Stiglitz came to talk in Ethiopia, I also had the opportunity to speak with Stiglitz. And I have some questions regarding I'm very supportive of everything that you've said. In terms, I'm happy to hear that there is a paradigm shift supposedly happening there. I'm a bit skeptical because, as we know, the IFC, the IMF, and the World Bank, the Bretton Woods Group were all established to rebuild Europe after World War II, right? And they have never been as effective for African countries. I've always been very critical. They say that they're donors. Actually, they're not donors in my view. The World Bank is an asset management company, and the assets that it manages are African countries and their resources. The terms of, the history of African loans, the way they've given loans to Africa, I'm sure you will agree, is in such a way that Africans cannot pay them back. So it's always associated with devaluation of currency, et cetera, et cetera. So the focus to me always seems to have been gaining control of African natural resources. To the brother from the Afro Diaspora think tank, everybody knows that Africa has the intellectual capacity because of the brain. We know the brain drain is a reality. We know that all of these highly skilled Africans are teaching at top universities all over the world. They're working for the World Bank. They're working everywhere. There's a joke that Nigeria's #1 export is oil and its second export is engineers. So, you know, I mean, there has never been good faith, in my view, at the World Bank, #1. That when it came to African countries, it seemed to me that the aim of the World Bank was always to gain control of African resources. And African resources down to what they now call human capital, right? Down to the productivity of each individual African citizen becomes collateral against loans which are structured in such, which have been structured in such a way that Africans cannot pay them back, right? So this lack of good faith is what led to BRICS, correct? It led to China, Brazil, Russia, India, attempting to create another parallel World Bank, right? So now I hear you loud and clear when you say that the present dangers of extremism, of Islamic extremism, and other forms of extremism are making them nervous. But the question is, in my mind, is do you believe that it's really possible to fundamentally change this entire ideology within the World Bank of neo-colonialism, of recolonizing Africa through structural racism and also, you know, economic strategies that have been successful in giving the World Bank control? Two, what about the collusion of African leaders? Because as we know, the World Bank lends through governments. Governments take loans from the World Bank. And so what we've seen, for example, in a lot of African countries is that people, you know, they will put corrupt people in power. We know everyone is not corrupt, but those who are not corrupt are usually not allowed to gain power. Or those who, once they gain power, they're corrupted. I don't know. You know, but in any case, there has been a collusion of African leaders because they can then easily embezzle those loan funds against the collateral, and that collateral has been the natural resources of these countries. So it's a big question I'm putting to you. I know, but these are the questions in my mind. To what extent can we completely turn around this organization that was built on corruption vis-a-vis Africa, and where does it lie vis-a-vis BRICS? What's your idea on that?
The first thing is really, I don't think, it's not by choice that they will have to restructure at this stage. The way, if you have seen, the UN now predicts by 2050, Africa will have 2.4 billion people by 2050. Right now, we are 1.2 billion. It doesn't matter how fast you grow. You can grow 10% continuously. You will not be able to meet the needs of 2.4 billion people. What is making them nervous? You know, if you look what happened in Ethiopia the last 2-3 years under Trump, you know, Ethiopia has never gotten the kind of money that has been going to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has gotten more money in 3 years of Trump than in 8 years of Obama. And there is a reason for it. Ethiopia is at the verge of collapse economically. This is the result of 50 years of failed policy. But if Ethiopia is to collapse, the rest of the world has come to the realization that other smaller countries, Somali and Djibouti, Eritrea, and so on, can also collapse. And that entire Red Sea, where about, in some cases, up to 40% of the global trade moves up and down, can be affected. So this is now worrying them more than anything. That's why during Trump's time, He's not known to liking Africans, let's put it that way. But Ethiopia has been getting more money than we have received. This is the same reality. One thing that has changed. In the old days, the competition between North America and Europeans as far as Africa was concerned, it was politically driven. They even have their own, Anglophone and Francophone. The British would not go to a Francophone country, that kind of thing. But now they are changing that. When the US, for example, passed the law just recently, one thing they have removed is in the old days, when they gave money, there was a condition that American businesses must be given, the contracts. But now it's not required, it's preferred. Because now that the competition is economic based rather than political based. British has announced that it is going to invest in Africa, not give aid, but invest in Africa to create a $2.3 trillion businesses in the next 10 years. But the competition now is not only China versus the West, but the West is now starting to compete on Africa. So it is primarily driven to get China out, but it's also driven by, if Africa continues the way it is, it can collapse. And what caused, if Ethiopia, for example, is to collapse, it would take trillions of dollars for the rest of the world to put her back together, to create a stable, functioning country, poor or rich.
Yeah.
So because of that, that is also one of the reasons on our side that would push them, or we can push for a more fundamental change. We could not have succeeded 20 years ago. Now the game has changed in many ways. With Black Lives Matter movement now has taken over Europe. You would be surprised how many African networks of African origin that have mushroomed over the last 10 years in Europe. So we do have the base, the timing because of this, and also, as you have, if you have seen the letter that we sent, the data is damning for them, for their own credibility. So pushing them hard. There is a reason why the World Bank has 12-story hashtag end racism. They want to kind of window dressing and diffuse the tension within the World Bank. 20 years ago, they would not have given a damn about what is happening because they were in a power of position. Now they're not.
Yeah, Stiglitz said something when he was in Ethiopia that I would like to hear your response to. Granted, he was no longer World Bank director, right? So there was a big meeting with the African Union ministers, and Stiglitz said this, and I'll never forget it. He said, "What I don't understand is why African countries don't get together and just refuse to pay back their loans as a group based on exploitation, colonialism, slavery, neo-colonialism, et cetera, et cetera." What do you say to that?
That's what our letter is saying. What we're saying is that's why we are trying to get universities. You see, African governments must be pushed. You would be surprised how far the World Bank goes in terms of threatening, in terms of bribing. Just to give you an example, and I hate to bring my case again. There was a big letter. One of the Trump's cabinet members wrote an article and published it in Ethiopia. Ken Cuccinelli is the guy who wrote it, and Ken Cuccinelli, for those of you who may not know, is the guy who said the poem on the Liberty Statue of Liberty was referring to European migrants, not Africans or not others. When he said, come send your people to me, no, that was for Europeans. That is a guy. But he wrote an article about my case, actually 3, not 1. Washington Times, Washington Examiner, and 1 in Ethiopia. And he asked the Prime Minister, why aren't you supporting your citizen? Why can't you stand against the World Bank? Why can't you write to our president and ask him to intervene? You know, he wrote this, but African countries are afraid. But what happened was right after that, the World Bank was supposed to give Ethiopia $1.2 billion in loan. They went and gave them 600,000 of it as grant, no strings attached. The other 600 as a loan. That was to push the Ethiopian government, please do not say anything about this guy's case. Because at the time, my case was in the Prime Minister's office, and I know for sure. And the Prime Minister was supposed to write a letter. And all of a sudden, here I am reading, the World Bank is giving Ethiopia 600 million out of the 1.2 billion grant. Having been in the World Bank, I know the only way the World Bank can give you grant is if you are about to collapse. For example, in Somalia, for example, in Sierra Leone or Liberia some years ago. It is in that kind of condition that we give grant. There was absolutely no reason for Ethiopia to give grant. So that was a bribe. And of course, the Prime Minister did not write that letter. So they would do anything and everything. But the only way we can get our governments act is if we can get civil society organizations, universities, and prominent scholars start to make noise within their own. That's why now we are really focusing on universities, CSOs, NGOs to write this and also to be part of the campaign.
Actually, I'm the witness of what Dr. Yonas said about his last point. I was presenting his case to high officials of the Ethiopian government, including the president of the country, the chief of staff. The answer I got from them was not only me, a whole bunch of people. They don't want to ruffle the feather of World Bank. So they literally refuse to engage on Dr. Yonas' issue, when it comes to World Bank. And that's what he's telling you. And that's not only in Ethiopia, that's in every part of Africa. Whatever burden the World Bank is putting on them, they just take it. They won't say anything. Whatever small crop of stuff they throw them from the table, they will accept it. And they are happy with that. And depending on those African countries to resolve our issue won't be a solution for that. Because they depend on that loan, they depend on whatever they're getting from this Western institution. That's what the same thing with China. They give them whatever it is. They cannot say anything about human rights. They cannot say anything about the pollution and all kind of devastation is happening in Africa. All these African countries are useless when it comes to that. But the diaspora organization, like Dr. Yonas mentioned, all those listed over there, they are now voice of the Black people. Now that's part of the reason we need to add our name. We need to bring all different, especially the part you mentioned about historical Black colleges. There are so many professors. There are so many, working in different aspects of Black agenda. But this is the best part. Come together, sign on the next letter he's submitting with a group of other organizations. And we need to demand that to have a seat on that table. And that's what the goal of his letter is. And we need to do whatever it takes, to accomplish that. And I think that's the part I want to add. And if you guys have something to say,
I would.
let's conclude this meeting as quick as possible.
Yeah, I would like to say that um, everything that has been discussed actually has been very intelligent stuff. It's our reality, and everybody's point is actually very powerful, and we are living in very interesting times. The fact that you are experiencing what you're experiencing right now, Mr. Yonis and Ms. Rachel Leslie, is just another proof that we have the corruption both in the high places and in the low places. Like the grassroots have always suffered this, but when it boils up all the way to the top, that's when it's most painful. I really like the conversation. I'm pretty sure that you're aware, even by the name of our little group here, that we definitely support this kind of conversation. We support the kind of request that you're asking, the kind of petition. We definitely sign those kind of things. And I like the questions and the conversation between Mrs. Rachel Leslie and Mr. Yonis that just ensued just now. I was actually taking some notes because these are really pressing issues. And Mr. Eugene also, his question and his contribution was powerful. Your response to him made me wonder, and I was going to ask the question before Mr. Rachel Leslie actually eloquently put it, if we still need to stay within the paradigm, because we have a lot of proof to show that not only is the African continent almost not educated enough, right where it is, not talking about the diaspora now, and a few of them that are not educated enough to fight against this monster, because their leaders are chosen for them, and those leaders dare not oppose, they dare not bring up things and issues like you are bringing up in this forum, for example. So we know that trying to continue to exist within the paradigm is really what we're doing right now. We're trying to fight for justice, but I hope that we realize that stepping out of the paradigm is actually the best ace that we have, because if we're able to unite, like you're saying, if you're able to gather African if you're able to gather civil societies, universities, NGOs, CSOs, like you're talking about, maybe small businesses or African peoples or Africans in the diaspora together, we're actually able to gather together and make a statement or make a stand and demand for certain things. If you are saying that from the World Bank perspective, that voice would have to be heard, and actions, decisive actions would have to be taken. If such peoples gather together to make a stand, then I think it's worth it to try to correct the endemic corruption. But ultimately, we need to, at a certain point, step out, because that system has been so corrupt and negligent that it even dares to do such things. It dares to assassinate. It dares to take people's lives. It dares to destroy a whole continent. So we need to, at a certain point, step out of that system and threaten it like that. Before going back inside, even if we're able to correct some injustices, if we're able to get that unity, I would stand for that unity at any point in time. And that's why, that's one of the reasons why I joined this group, because it says New African Network. I believe that a diaspora, not necessarily the one in the United States alone, but a diaspora needs to be created that basically hovers above the African continent, almost like a new African continent in space, in some not a physical contraptment, but a diaspora that can make solid statements and fight for the rights of its people. So I believe this New African Network is really the beginning of that diaspora. We need to be able to
bank.
That's going to be one of the milestones of the diaspora. It's, it took us a long time to understand that this was important. We didn't realize that we were actually, our neighbors are actually the devils, so to speak. But now that we know that, we have a lot of things in the milestones to achieve. But I think
that Gaddafi had been talking about all along, with the centralized Bank of Africa and using Africa's resources as collateral. And when we start talking at getting to those types of levels with financing and running the gamma from that perspective, it's big controversy to the Europeans. But yeah, Brother Obi, you're exactly on point with what you're saying right now. And of course, the diaspora itself, I believe, is the catalyst to being the gatekeeper of Africa, that is of our ancestors. And so we should have a definite say-so in what's going on in Africa as Africa develops itself into the next stage. And for Africa to be able to do that, it definitely is going to take the diaspora to do it, and especially trying to keep out those new colonizers that are getting in who understand what the resources of that consist of. So the whole part of this conscious awakening of African people in the new revolution is that our ancestors have awakened us for a purpose, and the purpose is to safeguard Africa. We may not want to take Africa in the direction of being nuclearized or killing up all the animals, cutting down all the trees and the resources, digging up all the gold, digging up all the diamonds, using all the resources of what could be there when needed, but greediness from the Europeans and from those people in the West have definitely captured Africa way ahead of what we were aware of as African people together.
Right. Talking about stepping out of that, we had, and I believe we all agree that if we had that new African network or that whatever, that connected African network, for example, it wouldn't be difficult to achieve what Mr. Yonas is asking for today. Like, it would just be almost like a decree, right? That everybody support that. And we wouldn't really have to go around, so really wish for that we can put all our energy and resources into as a group is getting that new African network. It's really critical. It's life and death at this point.
I agree with you, Brother Opevemi. I want to just quickly say that 20 years ago, I sat at the African Union and witnessed at the heads of state meeting, Gaddafi, before he was assassinated, sit down and say that what and everyone agreed to establish which all African countries were going to send troops, and that African countries were going to stop exporting their resources at this level, and they were going to put them in the African Central Bank, guarded by an African Federation army to back African currencies. And we watched one by one as the president of Algeria, Gaddafi, Obasanjo, Meles, we watched it one by one we watched them be neutralized in their attempts to do this. But to me, that is the ultimate solution, is that Africa needs to control its own resources, not be going to the World Bank or anyone else, and using its own resources to back its own currencies instead of their currencies being backed by dollar, a pound, or whatever. Yeah. And so I think that this initiative to stand behind Atoburu we can see is like a first step in a journey. I think it's important to support him. I think it's important to support this initiative. But as Yemi is saying, it's also important that we see the long view and we use this network and, push for a paradigm shift. What do you think, sir?
Actually, the second letter that we are preparing, the first kind of focused on the World Bank and IMF. But now what we're doing is, even the first one focused not only on the World Bank, but also on G20. There is now in the globalized world, there must be a global governance structure, which G20 purports to be, but Africa is not there. So what we're saying is, yes, a global governance structure is important in a world where we're really interconnected. But where are we? What voice? That is why we're focusing on the WTO and all these other international organizations that have been working as agencies of the developed world. So it's much broader than the World Bank. It is how the global infrastructure or the global power structure is dealing with Africa, how Africa is marginalized at the political level, marginalized at social level, marginalized at the political level. Then all these issues that are being raised, why aren't we the owners of our own currency? Why is this that, in Asia we see regional integration succeeding. In Latin America, to a large degree, we see it succeeding. Why isn't it succeeding in Africa? Why aren't African countries trading with each other? I believe now our trade within each other is less than 10% or less than 5%. This is not the case. So all these issues are critical issues. That has to start finding our place in the global environment. Where do we, what role, what power, what voice should we have? Once we get that, then the next question becomes really almost automatic, because once we have our voice in the global place, then we have to have our voice at the regional place. So all the issues that you're saying are vital for Africa's development. It is getting this kind of broad-based group that can confront not only institutions such as the World Bank and so on, but the global architecture. It is enough with the kind of environment that we have. Actually, we had a big discussion whether to use the term imperialism in our fight. We decided to remove it, and let me tell you why. Imperialism is an ideology. Some people see it, well, if properly managed, it's good. Some people may not. But when you talk about racism, it's a moral issue, it's not an ideological issue. There is no room to discuss, there is no gray area to negotiate or argue about. It's either right or it's either wrong. We wanted to put the World Bank and all these global institutions in that corner. We don't want to bring ideological issues. Why? Because they would not have a room to wiggle out of. That's why we framed it strictly on moral grounds. But down the road, even the issue of imperialism comes into play. Once we have our voice, broader support, because at this point, we do not believe we have a critical mass. So we want to bring everybody, even those who may think, oh, I don't see imperialism being bad in and of itself. As long as they oppose racism, global racism, they can be our partners at this stage. Moving forward, once we have created a critical mass, then we can bring in second layer issues, third layer issues, fourth layer issues. Because now everything is talking about global racism and Black Lives Matter, we wanted to make sure that we could ride it high in that wave. And then, once we have critical mass, once we bring them to the table, all other issues will have to be articulated, because by its very nature, as this group, the signatories of this group expands, the issues they bring with them also expand. The issue of the diaspora comes into the right now. Let's bring them to the table. It has never happened on the global level, racism being discussed at that level. Let's put that on there, and they will have no answer the way, if you see we have given them their own report card they cannot run away from.
But Dr. Yonas, you have definitely reached the right group, because that's what we do best. We put them all on point. And so, yeah, brother, you reached the right group of people to network with. And we are definitely on board with making these institutions reform as we are trying to get political justice for African people. When you talk about reparations and restitution, that comes across a very broad scale, and it goes all the way back to the time of the Berlin Conference. So yeah, brother, I know you probably very been across the world should be saying to former colonizers and oppressors, and to also look at not just focusing on the past, but carving out a new path for our future. And we are the new breed leader generation. And I definitely feel in my heart, and as what my ancestors have blessed me with knowledge with, to be able to relay that we are on the right track, this generation, to be able to bring forth change along with the new world order that's taking place. And so as some kingdoms will fall, there are going to be new kingdoms that will be rising up. And the African diaspora is one of those new kingdoms that are rising up at this moment. And it is a duty to demonstrate that, not just to the world, but to ourselves as a collective unit. So thank you, brother, for this information that you provided.
So I think we're now about ending from what Abby said earlier. Would it be possible for you all either to send me the person who is signing, the name of the organization, and I can pass it on. This is a group organized by Africans Rising in Africa. They have about 40 other, it's an umbrella organization in Africa. We have quite a number of major ones that have joined us since that letter was sent. So if you could send me who is signing, full name of the person, whether it's a president or a founding member or a board member, and the name of the organization. And also if you could encourage, particularly, we have not been able to get Black Lives Matter. Some of them are abolitionists by their orientation, but there are others who could see this kind of, racism we're talking about is the racism that affects 1.2 billion people. So if you can get others also to sign, we want to submit the next letter by Monday, and we're trying to get it to 100. So everybody's working on their end to bring it to 100 when we submit the next letter. That is not only targeting World Bank and IMF, but World Trade Organization and the G7, the G20, all these big organizations. I really am very thankful for all of you for listening to us, but also we are in this together, as you all have said.
Yes, we are. Yeah,
So,
thank you so much, Doc.
everybody.
Yeah, we thank you so much, and for the knowledge today. As you can see, my reaction now when tracking, like, if they can do that in that level, so you can imagine what is happening on the ground. So that's very powerful that you share your stories. And yeah, for us in our a new African network, this is what we do. This is what we talk about every Saturday. So, and for Brother Opie, I just want to second everything that you said. And this is what I always say to people: the way we are treated right now as a Black people is because we have weak leaders. If our leaders in Africa, if they stand up, all of them, and say, we're not taking this nonsense, this is where we're going to get our freedom, and this is where the Black people are going to be treated right. Even now in the United States, we can do all kinds of protests and be angry and all kinds, unless the leaders in Africa stood up and say, we're not dealing with this anymore. As Black people, we're not going to give that respect. And we have to be the generation to change that, because when are we going to wait? This thing been going for generation. It keep happening every single time. So it have to be a group of people say, you know what, we had enough, we have to change something. If it's not us, so be it. It have to start somewhere. So we have to put the work in. And again, that we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing this story with us, because this is powerful. Let's do it. I'm all about, I'd rather standing for something, for falling for anything. We're all gonna go one day. So why not stand for something? So I'm here with you 100%. I support you. I'm behind you. Black power. Thank you.